Yes, Madam Chair. I want to start by just citing some things into the record because some of the levels of conversation really ventured into what I believe the attorney was advising us on, and that is something that is restricted to the board's authority. The board's authority is restricted to approving the recommendation of the superintendent. The board's authority is not availed in the procurement process. And some of the conversation that I had some degree of discomfort at this particular time was almost venturing into the procurement process from the dais. And I think that is totally contrary to not only school board policy, but actually state law. And I want to read this into the record. The district's procurement function is governed by School Board Policy 6320, purchasing, which provides guidelines, procedures, and protocols for the, quote, procurement of supplies, materials, equipment, and services paid for county funds, end quote. Policy 6320 stipulates that purchasing shall be the responsibility of the procurement department under the general supervision of the chief procurement officer and shall be made in accordance with all applicable state statutes, Florida State Board of Education rules, school board policies, and administrative directives. It also states that no person may make any purchase with board funds unless authorized to do so by a board policy or administrative director or manuals approved by the superintendent. The agency designated for making purchases with board funds is the board's procurement management services. I wanted to read that into the record because I know there was some discussion about what the board can and cannot do at the dais. And to the extent that the procurement department has exercised its policy position, it's exercised its statutory authority to review all of the requirements relative to the RFP, that's their role, that's their responsibility. And I don't want to venture into trying to do that analysis from the dais. It's very technical, it's very specific, it's very clear. And in the recommendation made by the superintendent, it clearly states that more specifically the solicitation documents required. There's been a lot of discussion about, well, do we have to have this? Should we have that? There are concerns about that. Until the policy position is changed, that is a requirement. That is a requirement. And more specifically on this solicitation, the requirement was very explicit. It required a, quote, mandatory MWBE subcontracting goals, 16.9% non-minority, and it was very specific. Women, non-minority women, African American, Native American, and Asian American owned firms. The second lowest bidder was unable to meet this requirement, which resulted in the bid response being non-responsive. So through the chair, I heard some of my colleagues say that they were the second qualified entity. In fact, the process yielded it non-responsive because the goal setting committee established a 16.92 mandatory goal, and what was submitted was under 4%. There is conversation relative to some perceived ambiguity, and I think that ambiguity has regretfully seeped into some of the discourse at this board, and that ambiguity speaks around certification. There's a distinction between being certified and being explicitly in compliance with goals set forth by the goal setting committee. So just because I'm certified, that does not abdicate my obligation under this RFP to satisfy the criteria that's mandatory. So yes, I'm certified, but I have not met the requirement here under this particular RFP. So I want to kind of be clear to clear the record up with that, and I'm regretful that we even going too far down that rabbit hole. My third question was, and it was a statement made by one of the speakers, is that we filed a bid protest and we won. That's a quote. So through the chair, Mr. Harvey, can you clarify that statement? Because I do know that there's a process, and quite frankly, this is not usually the typical process. The process is a bid protest, but it was represented that a bid protest was filed, and the quote, we won. So through the chair, was there a bid protest that was yielded a victory on the side of the one who filed it? Through the chair.
Yes, through the chair. Following the last school board meeting, there was a bid protest that was filed by MCM to contest Thornton, the award to Thornton. Following discovery, Thornton voluntarily withdrew from that bid protest, and that then left MCM as the party that was being negotiated with. Then the recommendation that has come to the board, that's the subject of the board's action today. There was a notice of intended action that was issued on last Friday. The parties have 72 hours to file a bid protest. They did not file a bid protest, so there is no bid protest pending. And in addition to that, I should add that if there is a protest to certain requirements in the specs for a bid, they have to be filed at the time of the specs. So a spec protest has expired a long time ago, and with regard to the protest that could have been filed to challenge this particular award, the time has expired and the 72 hours elapsed.
So through the chair, I'll restate the question succinctly. Has there been a successful bid protest with respect to this particular award?
No bid protest with respect to this recommendation.
Yes.
That's before the board today, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Are you finished, sir?
Madam Chair, yes, I'm finished. Thank you.